time to hammer.
Oh, I gotta really try hard.
Shut it down!
Somehow it's the best.
After the credits.
A YumChunks podcast.
YumChunks!
Welcome, mutants, to episode 39 of After the Credits, a YumChunks podcast. I'm your intrepid host, Sean Davis, and with me tonight is Matt Chewy.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, and that's it. It's just, what happened? Where's everyone?
I got tired of this.
I guess so.
It took longer than I thought.
I know. I'm surprised we lasted this long,
This project has gone on. I mean, we're almost at episode 40, which means we'll be almost at episode 50. Amazing.
We're basically have been doing this for 10 years, is what's been going on. Yeah, so it'll just be Matt and I tonight, and Matt and me tonight. Unfortunately, others couldn't be here, but that's okay. That just gives us more time to express our own thoughts. We don't need their ideas.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I guess
we're talking a big game
yeah,
here. Let's see where we're at in like 30 to
well,
minutes
if
to
it fails, it's their fault.
Oh yeah, excellent.
And if it's amazing, it's obviously because it was us two.
I love only taking responsibility when it's a good out. Yes, perfect. Excellent. All right, cool.
And it'll be we don't have a lot to go around the fire tonight. It'll just be us entertaining each other with our Chunkfire stories. So what have you been up to recently?
What have I up to? I've seen, like I mentioned a few episodes ago, I've been seeing a lot of plays. I've seen a few recently. I saw a production of Sweeney Todd at the OB Playhouse. It's a very small venue in San Diego. This is the third production of Sweeney Todd I've seen. I've seen the real big one at Moonlight, and then I saw kind of one on a medium-sized stage. So this is a very tiny theater, and I really liked... I think this show is better the smaller the production is. Because the theater... I mean, it helped that we were in the front row, but the theater is real small, and so the action is real close to you no matter where you're sitting, pretty much. And then the fog feels just like when they use fog effects in the theater that size, It just feels so much more dramatic. Kind of feels like you're watching a play instead of a haunted house. So yeah, that play works really well in that kind of a setting. So that was fun. The theater I work at, Moonlight, they just opened the producers. I'm still on medical leave, so I unfortunately didn't get a chance to participate in the load in on this one, but I got to watch it, and I also very much enjoyed that. I think our Bialystok is pretty spot on Nathan Lane.
That's cool.
And then we got the Broadway sets and costumes again. So yeah, it's all the bells and whistles. So those are fun. Just taking this opportunity to see lots and lots of theater since I can't work in theater at the moment.
What is this, the first or second show of the summer season for Moonlight?
This is the first show.
Okay.
And
what's the rest of the playlist? The
next one is Matilda, which there's a lot of hype for. I'm a big fan of the book and the movie, but I haven't heard any of the music for the musical version, so that's the only thing I'm kind of like asterisk about, but otherwise I'm pretty excited for that. And they're doing West Side Story, and then a show called Victor Victoria, which is one I'm not super familiar with, but I guess it's based on a movie with Julie Andrews from the 80s, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm aware of it, but I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, so it's a pretty solid season, I would say, but I'm already a big fan of producers, but I think this is a hard one to top because it was a pretty strong season opener.
Yeah. I like producer. I think we saw that once we actually saw it on Broadway. My family and I took were in New York, and this was like right after the Matthew Broderick, Nathan Lane run. Mm-hmm. It was the same run, but it was right after so it was like Stephen Wright and
I believe
someone else.
Wasn't it John Lovitz played Bialystok?
It could have been. I honestly don't remember, but it was awesome awesome performance, and it was a lot of fun, regardless who were playing the roles or primary roles. But
yeah, and it's like I said, our theater does pretty high quality, and we have all the Broadway toys, so it's a good time. Outside of the theater worlds, I finally got around to seeing the movie 8th Grade.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was on my literal list of things I should have seen a long time ago. I have a notepad file saved on my desktop called that. But Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I was expecting, but not that. I mean, I guess it took me a little while. I wasn't even really sure if I was enjoying it at first.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of it is it's so real that it's uncomfortable, and I also a little bit there's a Facebook group that it's called "What If Phones But Too Much," and I see people tag that group on certain posts sometimes because it's like it's making fun of art that's really like we're too into our phones and technology and kind of like Black Mirror-y type of thing. And fun of that, it's kind of and I also felt like at first that's what the movie was gonna be. Because, she's like a video caster on YouTube, and there's a lot of scenes where she's ignoring people because she's on her phone, and then there's other characters who are ignoring her because they're on their phones. And there's a lot of that crammed into the first third of the movie or so. Yeah. And I was like, oh, no, I don't know if this is the movie I was hoping to get. But after a while, it kind of grew on me, and by the end of it, I really liked it. But yeah, it was just kind of not... I don't know. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it was kind of a little strange. But it's good.
I definitely loved it. It was, I think, mainly because I didn't have a ton of expectations going in, so maybe it was just kind of like just felt very authentic to me, and I loved it for that. But you're right. It absolutely is just like hard to watch in a cringeworthy, embarrassing sense. But I think intentionally so because it's so realistic in so many ways. Like, I know exactly how that feels. Like, God, I was just like that, or recognize the kind of parts of your own childhood. But yeah, the idea, like, I mean, it definitely has those themes kind of running through it, and it is a major part of the film in terms of like the screens and the phone and just kind of our public social personas that we have. But I agree that it's not like shoved down your throat in that regard. It's not strictly about that, and it's so. I don't know, obvious as like a Black Mirror episode. I think I'd like to say it does a little bit of a better job of, I don't know.
Right. Well, that's also like when you go
this message.
When you go into Black Mirror, you kind of like, that's the premise. Like that's kind of, what that show is going to be about. And going into this movie, I'm just like, okay, it's going to be about a girl's experience in 8th grade. And because it's so heavy on the tech themes early on, I kind of went, oh no. But then it didn't really follow through with that. So it became a more well-rounded movie than I initially thought it was going to be. So, I should have trusted because I'd heard so many good things about it. Yeah. But it was that was a good time. That was a pleasant that was a nice evening. How about you, Sean? How you doing? What kind of stories do you bring to the fire this evening?
Oh, let's see. I'll go to my old bag of tricks. One, I went to E3 last week, and if you want to hear any details about that, you guys should tune into our last episode, our bonus episode of our E3 coverage.
I don't want to hear about any of that.
Okay. Well, you already did because you were on that episode. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's why. But anyone else, you want to hear about Sean's experiences at E3 and my vicarious experiences?
Yes. Then tune into that. But that was a lot of fun. I always enjoy E3, so that was great. I'm going to play some games, see some friends, and video games. That's always good. Yes. And speaking of video games outside of E3, there's a couple games I've been playing recently that have been fun. So actually, it was released last week as part of E3, but a new Zelda game called Cadence of Hyrule. I don't know if you've heard of this or are aware of it, Matt.
I'm aware of it on the level that I'm aware of the game that like preceded it.
Yes.
What is it, Necrodancer?
Crypt of the Necrodancer?
Yeah, that game came out when I was in the height of my Dance Dance Revolution mania in college, and so I bought it and I played it a little while. I wasn't really into it, but then I saw this was a thing, and I was kind of piqued my interest a little bit.
Yeah, if you weren't super into Crypt of the Necrodancer, I don't know how much you'll be into this, though maybe I'll bring it by one day and you could check it out on my Switch before you throw any money at it.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
But it's that style gameplay, but in a Zelda game. So imagine like Link to the Past, it's semi-procedurally generated, but generally kind of follows the same pattern of you collecting items to allow you to get to other places and you powering up and getting more health and harder monsters and dungeons and all the standard Zelda stuff, but with the gameplay mechanics and combat of Crypt of the Necrodancer. Anyways, I'm enjoying it a lot. It took me a while. It's really hard at first, or at least I thought. I was dying repeatedly. It took me a while to kind of click in, and ever since then, I've just enjoyed it a lot more. But it's super fun, and it's Zelda, so it already kind of is. I'm biased towards it, and I'm enjoying it maybe more than I would have otherwise, but. Take that for what it is. I recommend, though, if anyone's interested in Zelda and or Crypt of the Necrodancer. It's a fun one. And I also have been playing this other game, also on Switch, called Slay the Spire. Have you heard of that one, Matt?
I have not even heard of that, no.
So it came out on Steam and I think PlayStation 4 last year. And the idea is fairly, it's pretty original. It's basically, it's a roguelike, but a deck builder game. So you're building a deck of cards that, like, think of, like, I don't know, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, or like actual physical card game like Dominion, if anyone's ever played Dominion who's listening, where you're trying to make a really efficient deck, a really good deck with lots of powerful abilities, but it's all in this realm of like a dungeon crawler that's, like a roguelike, procedurally generated with permadeath. So you're going and fighting, and you're playing your abilities based on the deck you have. But then if you die, you start at the very beginning, and you no longer have any of your cards. But you do know what card combos go well, so that as you progress through the next story, like, oh, I'm going to get this card because I know it works really well with this combo, and, like that kind of thing. And each time you play, it's a different layout of the dungeon map, so it's different each time. And it's fairly kind of, it's a fun little unique premise. Nothing super fancy, but just done really well and really addictive. It's one of those games where you just like play like, oh, okay, just one more time. I know I could do much better this time. And then that kind of feedback loop where it just kind of hooks you and you keep wanting to play. All right. So
yeah,
both games are perfect on the Switch.
I was going to say, I'm looking at screenshots of this game right now while you were describing it. And I really like the art style. It looks cozy. Looks like a good time.
Yeah, both of those, but especially Slay the Spire is just like super perfect for like if you have a couple minutes here and there and you're just like want to jump in, have some fun, and then, oh, I'm back in line at the DMV. Let me now do an eye test. And what else? Oh, and then one other thing. I saw a film on Netflix last week. I watched Behind the Curve. Have you heard of this film?
Only in title. I don't think I know anything else about it. Let's see.
It's a documentary, and in my tradition of the last couple of weeks, watching things that are very frustrating, it follows in line with that. It's a documentary about the flat earther movement.
Oh, no.
I know. I don't know why I watched this. I knew it wasn't going to be a good time, and I wasn't going to enjoy myself. And I didn't, but it actually is a really good film. It's just, it's a really interesting film. It's not a film where they're like trying to debunk or debate the merits of flat. It's not. That's not what it's about. It's more about the people and just like how do these people come to this notion? Like, why is this a thing? And they go into like the psychology of it. They primarily follow this one guy who's kind of the figurehead, the face of the movement right now, and they kind of follow his like cult of personality and why people follow him. But in some ways it's tragic, some ways it's kind of like hopeful, but in all ways it's very frustrating.
I've watched a lot of things about flat earth, but about flat earthers, not about the actual, it seems like there's a lot of people making content about just like why is this something that's like catching on so rapidly again. If I may hijack this real quick,
go for it.
There's a YouTube channel recommendation I have. My wife and I love to watch. It's called All Time Conspiracies, and it's interesting because like we're not like conspiracy nut people, like, but we're both interested in the concepts of these crazy conspiracies. You know what I mean? Like and this channel really looks at it. And it, in a way, it's kind of no fun because a lot of their videos end with, unfortunately, there's really no data to support this this theory. But it looks at them like from an academic standpoint, like, oh yeah, you're aware of maybe the flat Earth theory. Well, here's the deal with it. Here's what people who believe in this theory think. Here's how long it's been around, and here's variations of this theory. And they cover JFK, all the major all the big conspiracies they've done of at least a video about
fake moon landing.
A lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of like creatures. Like, okay, we're going to talk about Sasquatch. Well, let's talk about every version of the Sasquatch tale, where they originated, how long they've been around, people who still believe in it.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence? If so, how credible is it, etc. All-time conspiracies. It's a very
it's interesting.
It's kind of a dry academic look at conspiracy theories, and so if you're just interested in the concept of conspiracy theories, but worried about whether people are going to think
believe,
you don't want people to think you're a crazy person, then it's and that kind of seems like the documentary. What is it, Behind the Curve?
Yeah, a little. It's called Behind the Curve. Yeah, and actually, it's funny you mentioned a YouTube channel. There's a YouTuber that I really like that I follow and watch all the videos called H Bomber Guy, and he recently did a video about the Flat Earth movement, which is great. So that's another thing.
I have seen that video. I've watched that video. It's
he's
fantastic.
Really funny, and he's great. But that video, recommend that video as well. But this documentary, it takes more of an approach of okay, why do these people believe this? And there's lots of moments in there that are just so one of the people they follow really closely is this woman named Patricia something, I don't know. She's also kind of like the face of the movement, but for some reason, again, it's dealing with conspiracy theorists. I don't want to call them crazy, but crazy. She has become like a pariah kind of in the flat earther movement itself, and people have started to point fingers at her as she's a plant by the CIA. She doesn't actually belong here. She's here to throw people off, but she's a flat earther. All these theories about her from within that own subculture.
It's really crazy.
They follow her around a lot, and they kind of interview her, and she starts talking about it, and she's like, it's so weird. People think I'm part of this giant conspiracy and that I'm not who I say I am, and there's no evidence, but they cherry pick this evidence and stuff. It must be how people who believe in a spherical Earth, how they feel about us. And there's a moment there where you're like, oh, you're so close to the realization, and then she's like, yeah, but it's different.
I know you watch Jenny Nicholson's channel.
Yeah.
She recently did a video about this is a little off topic, but I have a point. But she did a video about Avengers Endgame. But I guess in producing,
I saw that.
She lost a bunch of her Audacity file, which we have done, by the way. Yes, But then, she just rage quit and did this rant about how, look, I don't even want to do this video because I don't really have this strong negative hot take that people are looking for. People are emailing me saying, I can't wait for you to rip apart Avengers Endgame. And she's like, I just thought it was okay, but if you don't hate something, then you're a shill and you're getting paid by Disney to say that I think this movie's okay. How does that make me how's this conspiracy? Where's the logic behind it? It doesn't make any, if you don't say that this movie's terrible, then you're getting paid to not say that. That's it's just wonderful.
It's just the odd, just this human behavior and human psychology. Just man, people are weird. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense to any one person. I'm just saying in general, people are weird. Why do people act the way they do?
I don't know.
Anyway, so that's what I watch. Like I said, it's hard to recommend because it's very frustrating, but it actually is somewhat insightful into just kind of the whole movement and stuff. So anyways, but that's what I've been up to. So that was some good Chunkfire stories. Just the two of us. See,
there you
we
go.
Don't need any others.
Some good bonding time. There we go.
But now that we're done with our tales, let's move into the main dish, which I have now just realized that I don't even think we mentioned in the intro to the episode.
It's fine. If they're listening, they clicked on the thing and it had the poster. It's fine.
So twist, we're going to talk about X-Men Dark Phoenix. Bum, bum, bum. Didn't see that coming. Unless you did.
Yeah, we read the title of the podcast for this week.
From here on out, there will be spoilers for X-Men Dark Phoenix. And not most likely, in case for some reason you are listening to this episode and watched Dark Phoenix but have not watched some of the other X-Men films, there's a very high likelihood there will be spoilers for pretty much any of the X-Men.
Oh, I'm spoiling it all. Let's do this.
So just throwing that out there. But before we get into our discussion, Matt, can you tell us what happened in X-Men?
Oh boy, this is the first time I've had to do this, and you
Yeah.
know what? It's. I'm realizing it's bad because I'm always hypercritical of when you guys do it, and now
It's not so easy.
now I have to do it. No, it's not so easy. Okay, so this picks up, I would say, a few years after X-Men Apocalypse, which I'm sure everybody has seen. The X-Men are now like there's a little X-Men team, and they're doing little missions for the president and for the U.S. government, and this one they got to go up into space, and it was a real space shuttle. Which one was it? It was one that was
Discovery.
I don't remember, but anyway, there's a space shuttle that's out in the atmosphere, and it got hit by some kind of space fire, so they're going to go up and rescue the astronauts, and while they're there, Jean Grey gets hit with the space fire goo, and she gets infected with the Phoenix Force, which is weird because in the end of the last movie,
we'll get there.
I want to get there now. Okay, whatever, we'll get there.
You're jumping the gun.
We'll get there anyway. Jean Grey gets infected with the Phoenix Force, and for a lot of the movie, she's just acting weird and whatever, and they're trying to figure out what's what. Also, Jessica Chastain shows up with some buddies, and they're aliens, and then she takes
Groot
over.
Aliens.
They're what?
Groot aliens. Oh,
They're aliens, yeah. And then so she's walking around, and we don't know what her deal is, and I guess she wants the Phoenix Force, and Jean Grey kills Mystique. Probably because Jennifer Lawrence didn't want to wear the makeup anymore, because it looks terrible in this movie, and she's only in the first act. But she kills Mystique, and then she goes on the run, and the X-Men are trying to find Jean Grey, and Jessica Chastain and her buddies are trying to find Jean Grey, and eventually everyone convenes at a house next to a train track, and then everyone's on the train, and there's a really cool train fight. Oh, dang it! That's
the
a
house
reason.
was in New York.
Was it? I don't know. Anyway, now I'm realizing why all others I'm upset that Ryan's not here, because there's a cool train fight in this movie. We both love train fights. Anyway, there's a train fight, and then Dark Phoenix wins and flies away because her planet needs her, and then Professor X and Magneto, who I haven't even mentioned until right now, they have one last game of chess, except for not really, because the timeline, and I don't know anymore. Anyway, that's Dark Phoenix. How'd I do?
A for effort.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it.
Yeah. So, where do we even begin with this? I don't even know where to start.
Okay, well, let me take it back then.
Yeah.
What were your? Oh yeah, here's a classic question. What's our history with X-Men? That's always one when we don't know what we don't know what to talk about. That's an easy one to start with.
I feel that's a slow approach to whatever we're going to get into soon here. But so X-Men have kind of always been my favorite comics.
Mm-hmm.
The movies I've all generally enjoyed. I mean, I think we've mentioned it briefly in other episodes how the first X-Men film in some ways kind of set the standards in some ways for the modern superhero film.
It was the Detective Pikachu for the comics.
Yes, that's right. That's what we were talking about.
We haven't got the Spider-Man yet for video games, but it was it was the Detective Pikachu.
So that gives you an idea of how I felt about X-Men, or how we felt about the original X-Men film. And actually, spoiler alert, this film reminds me so much of the original X-Men film, and not in good ways necessarily.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it reminds you of Detective Pikachu.
Oh, well, no, so much.
It doesn't at all. Anyway.
But I've enjoyed all the X-Men, and in fact, at one point when I was, I don't know, years ago, I was so obsessed with the X-Men that I basically downloaded all the torrents of every single issue of X-Men from 63, whenever it premiered, and read issue by issue every single X-Men comic up through like the late 1980s. Before it started branching off into so many spin-off series that I could not keep track, and I eventually never, I never finished reading every single one. But I have kind of kept up to speed in general terms of what's going on, and I know all the characters for the most part, and I have my faves and all that kind of stuff. But that's my background with X-Men. What about you?
Well, X-Men is one of two comic book IPs that I've ever had any kind of like association with, or read or picked up a comic for. The other one is Batman. Those are the only two that I've ever read any of the comics for. But with both of them, I grew up watching their cartoons, and so I've always been very familiar with those two properties because of the 90s cartoons, and I particularly loved the X-Men cartoon. I haven't seen the whole series, but I would watch it after school or whenever it aired, and I've seen a lot of it. And so that and then when the movies started coming out, I was real big into the movies, and I've been pretty much ride or die with the X-Men movie series for the most part since X1 came out in 2000, I think. Was it 99? I guess it was 2000. Yeah. So yeah, I've read a good amount, a handful of the arcs. I've read pretty much all the trade paperbacks that they ended up turning into movies. So like I've read God Loves Man Kills. I've read Days of Future Past. The one with the mutant cure that Joss Whedon did. I've read a lot of those, and that's pretty much where I'm at with where my X-Men history. So in 2000, it's a superhero franchise that predates the MCU before there was an MCU. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's been around for 20 years. And this is I think the 13th film or 11th. I'm including Deadpool films in the X-Men universe. Okay, well, then I can tell you in here in a minute because just in case I needed it, I made a ranked list of my favorite X-Men movies. That's a good idea. You don't have to, but I just thought maybe you might need it. 7. Deadpool 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Because there was 3 original, 4 in the newer ones. That's 7. 3 Wolverines. That's 10, and then 2 Deadpool. That's 12.
You're right. I had counted 11 because I forgot to rank Last Stand, and now I don't know where to put Last Stand in my ranking. I got to figure that out before we decide we're going to use this list for anything. Anyway, or decide not to. Whatever. All right. Well, what were your initial reactions to this movie after it was over?
I have a lot of mixed feelings. In general, there's stuff that I liked about it. There actually is stuff I liked about this film. I think there were parts of the story and some of the characters that I think with better handling and better writing and better directing and better everything would have been like interesting and good and captivating, and some of it shone through. But I think overall, my biggest takeaway is that it felt like a movie 20 years ago. It felt like a film with a fraction of the budget of Apocalypse, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but it just felt like it was phoned in so many ways. Lazy is a harsh word, but it did come across as like, let's just film this so we could be done filming this. Like, both in terms of the production values of so much of it, and in terms of the characters, in terms of the acting, so much of it just felt like, let's just get this over with.
Well, that's how I felt seeing it.
Well, yeah. What were your general takes? I mean, obviously pretty similar, I would guess.
Well, going into it, I knew what I knew about it. I knew that, and I don't know if you know this or not, but this is the critically and financially worst received X-Men movie. It has
I didn't know critically.
It has the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score out of any X-Men movie that's come out.
Even over X-Men
Everything.
Or Wolverine Origins?
It has the lowest score.
Oh my god.
It's
I don't agree with that.
It's also the first X-Men movie to not open at number 1 on the box office.
Wow.
So yeah, financially this movie's poised to lose a lot of money. It's a huge flop in every sense of the word. So I knew this stuff going into seeing the movie. But like you said, I don't think that any of that is fair or justified. I don't think this is the worst X-Men movie. No, I think there are several X-Men movies that are worse than this.
Yes.
I don't think it's the best, but I think looking at it as there's a couple things working against it, I think. One, that we've already had a live action Dark Phoenix story done in this continuity. I mean, I say continuity, massive air quotes with this series, but but we've already seen a version of Dark Phoenix in this universe. Yeah. It's also pretty much going to be the last one in this Fox timeline, and as a finale, I don't think they intended it to be a finale, but as a finale, it's very lackluster. Yeah. But I think that if this were just some random X-Men movie that just came out sometime in the middle of the lineup, I think it would have been fine. And there were some things I actually liked about it a lot. one of the things that you touted as a negative, or like how it's kind of like it just feels like cheap and lazy compared to something like Apocalypse. Like I thought Apocalypse was like overwhelming. It gave me like a stomach ache. I actually appreciated and really enjoyed some of the smaller scale action scenes in this movie. I really thought that some of the moments, like when they're on the street in front of Jean's house or when they're battling on the train, I love some of the really up close, like what I would call hand-to-hand combat, but it's like mutant to mutant, like up close power fights. I actually thought there was some really cool X-Men stuff in this movie. So
yeah, all the team up and the actual. I guess what I meant by the Apocalypse stuff, like I said, that it wasn't strictly a compliment for Apocalypse. I just meant in terms of how it looked and like. Kind of going back to what I said, this reminded me so much of the first one, where the action scenes were just like you could clearly tell there's just wires and like they punch and there they go flying across the room, and there's a certain visceral like quality to that I kind of appreciate, but I just feel like it just comes across as so dated now. Whereas Apocalypse, I'm not saying the quality of the film, but at least the action felt a little bit more in line with what we come to expect with these action movies. But I agree that the action scenes in this, when they were good, were actually really good. The fight scene in the train was actually really good, and the fight outside the little apartment in New York, there were moments that were cool there. But I think that also that was kind of the extreme for me at both ends. I mean, there were moments there that also did not work. So.
I mean, I've been trained basically since the year 2000 to like anytime I see new X-Men stuff on screen, my brain releases dopamine because it's been trained to do that. But like I legitimately really liked the first act of the movie. Pretty much everything up until Mystique died.
The whole space shuttle sequence was good. I thought the whole space shuttle sequence was great.
Yeah, and I was watching a review of this, someone else's review, but they're saying that like if you go back and watch all the X-Men movies, they usually take place in like the mansion or like an abandoned warehouse somewhere, and like the settings of a lot of the X-Men movies are very similar to each other. And just seeing like them like, all right, guys, we got to go up into take the jet to space, and we got to have a little space adventure. I was like, yeah, I'm here for space adventure. Like, cool. This is a new, like, why hasn't X-Men done this a long time ago? Like, cool, fine, like, neat, you know. And even since we've already had a Dark Phoenix movie happen, how are we only now just, you know? And I guess now the world, maybe earlier they thought like, oh, people wouldn't accept space adventures, but Marvel, the MCU has done Thor and Guardians and all that. People are ready for it, and it's almost like they didn't go far enough. Like they could have gone farther with space adventures, and people would have been up for it. But yeah, basically, and it's not just because I like Mystique. I don't even particularly love that character, but I just feel like everything after that point in the movie just kind of slowed down, and I needed more momentum. I need more answers. I need to know who Jessica Chastain is. I need this movie to like get like pick up his feet and start walking somewhere. And I after that point, it kind of just felt like several slogs in between some neat action scenes. You know. Well,
there's so much of it that kind of just melded into, I don't know, it just kind of felt generic in a lot of ways. And I think exemplifies the best is Jessica Chastain's character and just the antagonist force in general. I think it was just so boring and lackluster. Like, she was obviously the only one that was actually a character, and she was barely a character. But, like, the rest of them, it just, like, they were like zombies, kind of. Like,
right.
It was unclear what their powers were, and it was just like they just felt like the most boring kind of guys. And then when they weren't in their alien form, which was, again, this kind of goes what I was saying, it clearly just seemed like a sign of them like, well, we don't want to spend a lot of money, so just make them guys in suits during some scenes. Like, they just were like normal people in clothes.
If the motivation of your villain is going to be a mystery, then it needs to be something cool when they reveal it. And it was just nothing.
This is also kind of curious too, because I had thought I had read beforehand during the production of this, and you know that they were announcing they're going to make another Phoenix film, that they were actually going to do the Shi'ar Empire,
right?
And so then when it wasn't, when it felt like they could have, that was also kind of weird that it was just like, because they're doing a space species, and in a lot of ways it felt like they were setting up the Shi'ar Empire. And I don't know how I felt like it would have been. I'm just saying, it would have been more interesting and I think compelling than the villains that we got, because
Right.
the villains were pretty lackluster.
Yeah, they made a big deal in the press leading up to this movie beforehand that they were going to do a much more comic accurate version of.
Yeah.
And I had to, because I had to go look this up to figure out who Jessica Chastain was supposed to be later on. And in the comics, after Jean's infected by the Phoenix Force, she goes crazy and she destroys a planet. And and that's the same planet that Jessica Chastain is from that planet. And in this version of it, the Phoenix Force destroyed the planet before it got to Jean Grey. And I went, okay, well, all right, I guess that's more comic accurate, but it's not far enough for me. It's not different.
And it robs a lot of like the fun conflict and the stuff that the original Phoenix story was so good for, why it was so good.
Right.
Which also I have another issue just in general with this and the Last Stand, is that the idea that it's called Dark Phoenix, but Phoenix in and of itself is not dark. Like, Dark Phoenix is a separate arc than the Phoenix arc, and I don't know why they keep doing that. Phoenix isn't evil. Phoenix isn't in and of itself an evil thing. It becomes evil when Jean Grey becomes corrupted by the Hellfire Club. Like, again, I'm getting into super comic nerd stuff, which is not relevant. But I'm just saying, like, if they're gonna do a Dark Phoenix, why not just call it Phoenix?
Right. If they're gonna bother to try to do a more comic accurate version of the story and then brag about it, then do it. Like, I don't care how accurate it is. If it's good, it's good. But if you're going to tell me you're going to do an accurate version of this, then do it. Yeah. I thought on the Dark Phoenix note, and this is maybe goofy, but and we're jumping around all over the place. But at the end, when Jessica Chastain's trying to take the Phoenix Force away from Jean Grey, and it gets interrupted, I thought like, oh, okay, so they're both going to be Phoenix, and now Jessica Chastain is Dark Phoenix, and now Jean Grey gets to be the good Phoenix, and there's going to be a Phoenix fight. That would be cool, and also goofy, but who cares? At least they would acknowledge that there's two different Phoenix versions of the Phoenix Force. Like, that would be fun. That'd be a neat way to end the movie. Whatever. It'd be all right. I would have been all right with that, but,
But then, I don't even remember what happened. She just dies. She kills her. What happens?
I think she, like...
turns her to ash or something?
She like... sucks out all the Phoenix Force in space, and then something like that. I don't know. She dies in space, and then Jean has to fly away because her planet needs her.
But then come back for the original X-Men film.
Nothing at all, because this is the finale to X-Men. Until Disney does something.
Well, so I mentioned also some of the acting to me came across as like, all right, we got to do this. I mean, I think Jennifer Lawrence is the easy target, but I did also feel like Michael Fassbender a little bit was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. What am I doing here?
Well, okay. Yes and no. I mean, well, going back to Jennifer Lawrence, yes. Because it's very clear, especially, I use the makeup as an example, but if you screenshot, her makeup looks so terrible in this compared to any other movie that Mystique is in. And it's just her face and her hands. Like, they never even show the full body Mystique, and they're still cheaping out on that. Michael Fassbender, I think that aura of him being like, I don't care, maybe because this is the second movie in a row where it starts with him just like minding his own business in seclusion somewhere, and then the X-Men or someone shows up and goes, hey, Magneto, it's time for you to be Magneto again, and he's like, no, I'm not, I don't want to be just leave me alone. Like,
that is funny. I was thinking, how many times has he had to like start his new life over?
Yeah, every time he's just like, I'm just trying to be good, just like go away, just leave me alone. And I don't know if that's his performance's fault. I think that's more of a writing issue, but
maybe
he plays that emotion very well, if nothing else.
That's true. I still like James McAvoy. I thought he's still kind of, at least he worked for me as Professor X. I've always liked him in all the newer X-Men films.
Yeah.
Did you have an issue with like, there's so much of like the character dynamics that both don't make sense and also just like motivate people in the weirdest ways. So
yeah, I don't really know.
I don't know why everyone hated Professor X at the beginning. Not everyone, but like, I don't know. Like I had a hard time buying Mystique's argument for Professor X, like ruining, like being evil. Not evil, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, they like, I don't know. I feel like he's doing his best given a
Yeah.
not very good situation. Like, there's no precedent for this. What's he supposed to do? Also, I feel like what you're saying is like, everybody being mad at Professor X. Okay, Simon Kinberg wrote and directed this movie. This is his directorial debut, by the way. Sorry,
that's right.
Simon Kinberg. But he also co-wrote Last Stand, which also had a whole plot where Logan was mad at Professor X because you didn't have the right to mess with their brain like that. I wonder if he was just an autopilot writing, going like, well, of course, this is the part of the movie where everyone's mad at Professor X, only we won't blow him up this time because they didn't like it last time.
Or maybe he just has an issue with Professor X.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, it's a personal vendetta. Yeah, I think I did feel like maybe there's a little bit of the laziness, or at least just autopilotness in the script there.
Yeah. And so in terms of how those kind of character dynamics came out as a result of that kind of thing, and then how Beast reacted, and it all came across in some ways as a little melodramatic and not always bad, but it just, some of those moments just felt like, I don't know. Did Beast
tell Mystique that he loved her when she was dying, or did I imagine that?
I think it was vice versa. Mystique told Beast.
Oh,
that she
right.
loved him.
Yeah, I remember being really
like
that.
that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's what I was like. Oh, you wait. Really? That was the emotional core here for the last 4 movies.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. All right. This is news to me.
Those kind of it just felt like playing for the most extreme. She's dying in his arms and says, "I love you."
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like X-Men. At least not.
No, it doesn't.
X-Men to me.
And then what makes this all worse? What you're saying is that and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but they did Days of Future Past, and then they sort of not rebooted, but they reset the timeline so that they didn't have to be bound by the original timeline. But now I don't know. I think that makes it even worse, trying to sort out people's priorities and personalities and whatnot, because I'm trying to remember who was in what timeline when, and what happened to who, and who experienced which events, and it just makes me just like, oh, okay, so right, there was a point at some movie where Mystique loved Beast, I guess, and
yeah,
I guess it
was the original.
It was First Class,
or not the original First Class.
Yeah,
but actually, so I actually had I was trying to work out I've always had this idea as a YumChunks project that we could branch off is do some sort of video series and or podcast where we explore a timeline of a different franchise, because I'm always fascinated and love trying to piece together timelines. Ugh. So in a very lackluster half thrown together effort in that regard, what is the timeline of the X-Men universe? Let's figure this out. So what I have is the very first thing that we could track is Apocalypse, right? That's the first 10,000 BC or whatever.
10,000 years ago into the future. Yes.
So from there we jump to the World War I, when Wolverine is with Sabretooth and they're mutants, and he fights in the World War and loses his memory, right?
Yeah. Okay. Hold on a second.
I think that's right.
I have my ranked list, but I'm gonna copy paste this all, and I'm gonna rearrange it as we piece this together. So we started with Apocalypse. Okay, yes. And then we go...
Well, yeah.
And then we go Origins Wolverine is the next one that we see anything in the timeline, right? Because we go to the Civil War and all that junk. Okay, cool. Yeah. So
then from there, I think we go... First Class, right?
I think so, but I think this is where we're going to start to have problems, because we either have to decide whether this is all one timeline and things get erased, or whether things fracture.
Let's work with it all being one timeline for now.
It's not going to work. All right,
it's going to work. We're going to make this work.
Not going to work.
So Apocalypse, and then Wolverine Origins, and then First Class.
We're already technically kind of off, because most of Wolverine Origins takes place, I think, in the 80s.
No, well, I'm not saying the whole film. I'm just saying, yeah, you're right. It'll also be in the 80s. So will Apocalypse, right? But I'm just saying, in terms of just kind of tracking events that have happened in the X universe. Okay. Right? Does that make sense? Kind of fitting this timeline together.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a timeline, there would be little spokes on the timeline for those events. Apocalypse 10,000 BC, Wolverine early 1900s. Vague just time there. Then we jump to 62.
First Class was in the 60s. We'll just say the 60s.
Well, I guess you could say 45 or 44 or whatever. Nazi Germany with Eric.
Oh, and X1.
Right? X1 and First Class.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave X1 alone for now. So we go First Class, and then This is easy. After First Class, we go to Days of Future Past, right? Or
yes, that's 70s, Days of Future Past.
This is
right?
We can't keep it a straight line. It's not possible.
No, well, okay. So Days of Future Past, and then Days of Future Past. It goes to Apocalypse.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, back to Apocalypse again. Yeah,
and that's in the 80s. And then from there, we go to Wolverine Origins again, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't exist in the same timeline as Apocalypse though. That's the erased timeline.
Is it?
Yeah, it has to be.
Why?
Because that one leads into X1 and X2. That's a prequel to X, because X2 implies the Weapon X project, but Origins Wolverine is the one that actually shows us supposedly the Weapon X project. So that's in the X1, X2 timeline, the Last Stand timeline. Has to be.
But I mean, is there anything that strictly contradicts each other, though?
Sean, every movie contradicts every other movie. What kind of a question is that?
Like little minor things. I'm just saying. I think you could still say he is in like Wolverine Origins before, like as he's part of whatever. What's the squad in Wolverine Origins that the little squad is part of? With
X-Force.
Is it X-Force? I don't know what they call it.
I don't know what they call it, but Ryan Reynolds is there somehow.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds, and that's all. That's in the 80s. So this takes place, 80s.
Actually, that kind of does make sense because Apocalypse and Origins Wolverine both take place in the 80s, and in both movies there's a scene where Logan escapes from a facility naked into the snow. So, actually, there
you go. They're kind of just retellings of the same event. But anyways, the first part of Origins though takes place in the 80s before the Apocalypse part of 80s, right? Because he's not like captured and done experiments yet. He's still like a happy member of X-Force from Stryker. It's not until later that Stryker,
I guess so.
Right.
So what I do is I split Origins and Wolverine. I space those two words out and I shove Apocalypse in between them.
Yes.
Oh, no. Okay, this is getting messy.
Okay, so that's Apocalypse.
Okay.
So then from there we go to
the original trilogy.
Then the original X-Men.
The original trilogy outright, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the original trilogy, X-Men, X2, and Last Stand.
Yes.
Then from there we go to the Wolverine, right?
Oh, no. I don't know how that one works. Okay, here's the problem with the Wolverine. Is that if that takes place closer to present day, then when he comes back from Japan at the end after the credits, he runs into Professor X, who's not exploded, and he runs into Magneto.
Well, okay, so I just assume because at the end of Last Stand they show Professor X waking up in the thing, and they figured out how to make him.
Okay,
Professor
fine.
X
That's not even the big issue. The bigger issue is that they're like, Wolverine, you're back. You're back. You got to come help us because of the robots and Trask is a thing and the Trask robots and the Sentinels. But then that's like what that scene takes place in the early 2000s.
Yeah, whenever the Wolverine.
And then
take
the
place.
next thing that happens,
they're from the future, though, right? They're in the future.
It's
right?
never established. That is never. I don't know where you're getting that, but that's never established.
It's never established. Well, either they're from the future or they're just like, this is gonna happen in the future, so let's hang out.
Let's do nothing until it's such a big problem. The world is a wasteland. Okay.
Yep.
And then that means from Last Stand the Wolverine, we go back to Days of Future Past.
And then we go back to Days of Future Past, which is the future. But that future's kind of erased because they fixed it. Because that was like a fake future already.
Yes.
Right? So that was the fake future. So then what really happens is it's not the apocalypse, but it's still kind of bad. So then Logan happens.
Okay. I don't know where to. Okay, let's put a pin in that one for right now. Okay, but here's the thing: definite timeline wise, Days of Future Past. They then send Logan into the 70s, which then leads into Apocalypse because he gets captured by Stryker, who is maybe Mystique. I don't know.
Well, so he gets the Mystique thing. Regardless, let's just say Stryker captured him, and then that's when he made him join the Happy Squad of X-Force.
Okay, but then okay, sure, all right, fine. And then after all that, after Apocalypse, now we've gone through the whole loop. All right, we've gone through the timeline, and we've looped backwards like 2 or 3 times already. Now, finally, we're at Dark Phoenix. Oh, by the way, where do you want to put the Deadpool movies?
That's what I was going to mention, because there's a scene in Deadpool 2 where he walks into the mansion and he sees Beast and Professor X, but it's James McAvoy Professor X, so it has to be in the early 90s.
Okay, but in Deadpool 1, he references Patrick Stewart. So he's experienced both timelines somehow.
That's true. Deadpool takes place in both of them. Wait, when does Dark Phoenix take place? No, Dark Phoenix, we forgot to mention Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix takes place after
Apocalypse.
After Apocalypse, right before the original trilogy.
It takes place in the 90s, and the original trilogy takes place in the early 2000s.
Yes.
Because for whatever reason, this reboot series, they have to do a different decade. Even though they stopped playing with the time period at all.
Yes. Yeah, there was no 90s element in this movie at all.
Nobody's watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the rec room of the X-Men.
Although there was Dazzler. Did you
like the gosh,
Dazzler?
there was Dazzler. I forgot about that. How did I forget about
Dazzler.
No, except for I'm mad about that, though.
It wasn't Taylor Swift.
That's apparently what it is. The thing is, at some point, I think it might have been during production of First Class, Lady Gaga tweeted a joke on April Fool's Day that she was cast as Dazzler. Completely a joke. And then, not a joke, Taylor Swift got casted as Dazzler as in a cameo for Apocalypse, and then they cut...
for Days of Future Past, wasn't it?
No,
it was Apocalypse.
No, Gaga was for Future Past, and then Taylor Swift filmed a cameo scene for Apocalypse that got cut from the movie.
Yeah.
And then Dark Phoenix finally had Dazzler, but it was neither Lady Gaga nor Taylor Swift. Gosh, what a worse version of the timeline. All right.
Damn.
Both the movie timeline and the one we're living in. There's a timeline we're living in where all of these movies have Taylor Swift playing Dazzler as a main character.
As a main character. Just like the X-Men arcade game.
Yes. Oh, boy. Where's that fit in? Okay.
Oh, jeez.
All right. Well, I think we figured this out. What did we accomplish, though? How do we feel about this? Did we do anything important with our?
I mean, I assume when people listen to this, it'll be revelatory. People will just hold hands, and peace will be a wave will come across the earth as people realize how it all makes sense thanks to us.
It will be that, but it's going to be more like the movie Us. It's going to be that.
Yeah. People will rise up.
People are holding scissors and half the world's dead.
The Morlocks will come out of the sewers.
Oh, good. All right.
Okay, well, I'm somewhat satisfied. I think
No. I actually think, okay, for real, I think you can watch the original trilogy, First Class, Days of Future Past, and Dark Phoenix. I try to figure out what's the combination where you watch the most movies with the least amount of continuity errors, and I think that's what that's what it is. Original trilogy, so 1 through Last Stand, then you go back in time, you do Last Stand, or no, First Class, etc. I don't know, and you go all the way from there through Dark Phoenix, and I think everything still works. Cause
it kind of does.
I mean, basically throw out the Wolverine movies.
Well, not just because they may not make sense, but just throughout the Wolverine. Well, except for Logan.
No, that one. A lot of people, when the Wolverine came out, they were like, oh, yeah, that was good. And I never was super on board with the Wolverine. I think everybody was just hyped that it wasn't...
It was okay. It was just better... Yes.
Wolverine Origins bad. It was... Yes, I think it's at best okay. But it turns into schlock at the end with a giant robot battle for no reason. And I don't know. They could have had something with that movie, I think, but... I don't know. Anyway, boy, we got off the rails there, but we fulfilled our promise of spoiling every movie in the series, I think.
Exactly. We had to fulfill that. It was like the giant climactic train fight, even though we're not necessarily at the end of the podcast. It was still climactic. But okay, so kind of jumping from that, why did they kill Mystique and Phoenix at the end of this? There was no reason to kill either of them.
Well, again, I think a lot of how Mystique's character has been handled in the last two movies, I think just has to do with Jennifer Lawrence and her contractual obligations and just trying to do the bare minimum, I think. I was really cynical, but I really think that they're trying to just she's like, all right, you can have me for this much, and I'm not going to spend more than this many hours in the makeup chair, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that has to do with that. But killing Phoenix at the end, I guess she probably... Well, she flies away. You can see her flying away in the sky at the end, so she's not dead, but...
Isn't the... I feel like they've played that note too... that's how X2 ended.
Yeah.
That's how Apocalypse ended. And, hey guys, there she is again.
Oh yeah.
you can't.
Now I can talk about this. Now I can talk. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Definitely talk.
The end of Apocalypse.
Yes.
Is killing everyone, which he should have been able to do with a finger snap at the beginning of that scene. But he's killing everyone, and then Professor X says, "All right, unleash the Phoenix Force. It's inside of you. You have to unleash the power inside." She does, and it's a giant firebird. But then this movie, which is a direct sequel to the one before it, it's not even like they're trying to connect two different timelines or anything like they did with Future Past. This is a direct sequel to the last to Apocalypse, and this one says no. Later on, 10 years later, she's going to get the Phoenix Force infected with it in a space shuttle. What? How do you like? That's not. That is, you just don't care at that point. Right? It has to be. If you're writing this movie, you have to be like, no one's going to care about this. Why should I? It has to be.
I mean, the thing is that they could have explained it with some just whatever writing mumbo jumbo of, oh, she's always had this power inside of her and the Phoenix Force unlocked it, or it manifests itself and enhances what was already inside of her. So we saw the end of Apocalypse. There was something powerful. She's really powerful that's hidden inside, and whatever the cosmic force is that she collided with, just unleash it and she loses control.
Yeah,
like that. Like
I mean, I feel like the movie tries to sort of do that because Jessica Chastain says like, "Oh well, the Phoenix was looking for a vessel. It was looking for a vessel that was powerful enough to contain it." Right?
Well,
okay.
They did not do a good.
They should have gone
at all.
farther into that because the last movie explicitly shows a giant firebird burst out of her. So they should have somehow.
Also, it's so going back to what I was saying about how Phoenix is not a force of evil in and of itself. Like, they're already being schizophrenic with how they're portraying Phoenix, because at the end of every single one of these films, Phoenix is a sign of hope.
Right.
But then when you actually see Phoenix, it's just this evil, destructive force that kills everyone. Like, oh God, we thought it was coming to say, oh God, why did we think that was hopeful? Like, at the X2, like, there's still hope inside, and we're panning over the lake in Canada, and
and then
oh wait, she's back and killing everyone. I guess it was a foreboding ending to X2.
You watch X2 again, and like it's the actor who plays Phoenix, and she's reciting the monologue that X1 opens that Patrick's, and it's so, and the music is like triumphant. It's like, oh yes, this is, here we go. Yeah, and it's like. And then she's a crazy person in the next one. And everybody dies. And everything vaporizes. And the Golden Gate Bridge is in ruins. And everything's terrible.
And it wasn't like she was corrupted. That was just how they presented Phoenix. And in some ways, it's kind of similar in this. And that's why I was like, why was she, like... It was one thing if it was just raw power. But they made the point of kind of repeatedly saying that, like, it's enhancing her worst impulses and making her violent, and it's like that's not necessarily what Phoenix was or does. I don't know. I don't know. Just strange.
It's wacky.
It is. It's wacky. I don't know. Well. Okay. So now that we've worked out the timeline, solid, rock solid, airtight. Let's rank our X-Men movies. I've had time to think about this, so.
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't put Deadpool in them.
I have them, but I also did not either because I couldn't figure it out, actually. But let's just go with the base 10 then.
Okay. I wasn't sure where to put Logan because I think it's objectively the best movie, but it's not my favorite, and I think
I would say go with your favorite.
I would say my favorites are the way they are because of a heavy dose of nostalgia. So I'll start from the bottom. I'll say Origins Wolverine is the worst.
Yes, that is also my
and then
favorite.
Right above that is Apocalypse, and then
oh really? See, I have Last Stand above,
and then we'll say Dark Phoenix, and then Last Stand.
Really, you like?
All right, let me take a detour here. I think Last Stand was the only one that. I think it's the only one I really had high expectations for, because X-Men 1 came out and nobody knew the comic movies weren't really a thing, so I was just like happy it was an X-Men movie. And then X-Men 2 came out and I was like, the first one might have been a fluke. I don't want to get, and then it was better. And I was like, I was nervous because they were changing directors, but I'm like, man, I can't wait for the conclusion to this trilogy. And it was so just heartbreaking. But now that I've had time
Yes.
to think about it and rewatch it compared to a lot of the other X-Men movies, I'm like, it's not really that bad of a movie. Like it's got things up.
I mean,
It's got things about it I definitely don't like, and I just like an X-Men fan. There are things that I hate about it, but if you were detached yourself from any kind of fandom or bias or anything, I don't think it's that bad of a movie. I think it's okay. But yeah, I would say so. Where was I? Last Stand was above Dark Phoenix. Then above Last Stand, I would say The Wolverine. Wolverine Goes to Japan, and then First Class, and then Days of Future Past above that one. Then I put Logan. Then I put X1, and then X2 is at the top.
Okay, so I have same thing. Starting from the bottom, I have Wolverine Origins. Then I have Last Stand. Then I have Apocalypse. Then I have then I have Dark Phoenix. Then I have The Wolverine. I think that's probably and then I go with the original X-Men.
Okay.
So that's a little further down my list than yours. So X-Men, then First Class, then Logan, then Days of Future Past, then X2.
Okay.
So we both have our favorite X-Men film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a couple other differences.
I know a lot. I think X1 doesn't hold up as well, like when you compare it to modern movies. But I think as an X-Men movie, when I go back and rewatch any of these, I think that's the one that really like hits home on the the ideas that like, oh, we have to accept people who are different. You know, our differences make us special, not freaks. And I think that's really. I don't think they've ever really hit upon that as strong in any other movie since then, since the first one. I think that one really because the focal point in that one is Rogue, whose character they ruined in Last Stand. But I really like that we see the story through the eyes of someone who is an outcast and is afraid and is being shunned and doesn't know what to do with herself. I really like that that's the focus. And I just, like I said, I don't think they've ever captured that as well.
I that's a good point. I agree, and I think for the most part they don't even try with the Wolverine ones. But with the other ones, I feel like there's moments and elements where they do some interesting things. Like even with Last Stand, the idea of the cure, like, oh, that's an interesting thing, but I didn't really like where they took it in that film. Or even with Dark Phoenix, with this idea that like, oh, we're actually at a place where we're living in peace with them, and we could see the benefit, and then because there was a disturbance in a neighborhood, everything falls apart. Like I don't like that kind of ends up being disappointing. So yeah, there are elements in all of them, but you're right. I do think just that kind of core, what X-Men has kind of from the beginning tried to be about. I kind of agree with you actually.
Yeah, and that's why it's so high up. I mean, a lot of people I think would put it somewhere in the middle on their lists, but I guess it just depends on what you want out of an X-Men movie, or if you want anything out of an X-Men movie, you know what I mean? If you care that much. I feel like again, it's never been as mainstream as something like Spider-Man. I think a lot of people who are going to these movies just kind of want an entertaining movie. So it's whatever. And I mean, I guess going back to Phoenix, there are worse movies to spend 2 hours with. Actually, it wasn't even that. It was just, I think it was like an hour and a half. I think it was a pretty brisk movie. And I will say it didn't overstay its welcome to me. Like it didn't drag to me, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean it dragged a little bit for me, but it was over quick. Anytime I started to feel like okay, come on. Not too long later there was an action scene. So I don't know. It was okay in that sense, I guess.
Speaking of, I mean, we kind of touched upon this earlier, but I think it's worth kind of going back. I was actually kind of happy with some of the X-Men. Like, I was actually surprised how much of role Nightcrawler was given, like how significant. He just seemed to be one of the kind of the underrated, like, kind of stole a show in a lot of those action scenes.
Yeah,
they used him a lot.
I was going to bring that up, but I didn't know where. But yeah, I kind of forgot that he was in Apocalypse, if we're being honest, because they actually used him pretty well. Yeah. I mean, you get, and
when he rages out and like starts like stabbing and teleporting at that, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, that was like the best of the like my favorite parts of this film were those moments.
It's hard for me to not, when I'm watching a movie like this, or like going back to our Us talk about how it's hard for me to not get into what I would do if in a fight situation. I'm sitting there coaching the characters who can't hear me. Like, nah, pick up that chair and hit him with it. But, and watching the scenes in the train, there were so many moments that were satisfying to me on that level, especially with Nightcrawler, where I'm like, oh, yes, good. That you get your power. You've been training at the mansion. You understand it.
Exactly.
Good.
Finally.
This is what this is about.
Or, like, he teleports that one whatever out onto
like
the
in front of the train. Perfect.
Yeah, that was like, oh, this is awesome. This is
because that character,
or even
I was no, go ahead.
I was gonna say even Cyclops. I was actually kind of happy with some of the power, like the way he was using his powers in this one. One thing I did think was funny, like the way they just wrote out Quicksilver, because he's been one of the highlights of the last couple films, and they're like, well, he's too powerful and he's too cool. He
really is too powerful.
Get rid of him early,
right?
So I was like, well,
wait,
like,
I don't even
know,
remember what did they do to him
when they're fighting Phoenix in front of her, Jean Grey in front of her house. She like trips him.
Oh yeah, he's injured or something.
Hospital.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
and he's not even in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, man. Well, how disappointing. Yeah, he really has been a highlight for this new timeline series of X-Men movies.
And then there's like, nope, we can't keep doing that. He's gone.
Well, at the same time, like like his scene in Days of Future Past was such a standout, and I was like, they're not going to top that. And I actually think that in Apocalypse, maybe because I like the song more, the Sweet Dreams, but I actually think the scene where he saves everyone from the mansion exploding, they did top the Pentagon scene. That is my favorite scene in Apocalypse. It's probably the only scene I genuinely love in that movie. Yeah. But it's clever. Also, we finally got to see the mansion blow up. That's a thing that happens constantly in the cartoon, in the comics. I don't know why I'm sitting here praising X-Men Apocalypse, but there were a couple of things like that. And maybe they just like, you know what? Why try again? We're not gonna do a third one as good as the last two. So I don't know. I would hate for them to have tried and failed. It would have been very apparent watching it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's the point, kids. Don't try at anything.
Exactly. That's the first step towards failure. What else? I guess Storm was just lightning. She just said lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. That was, I felt like, which is fine. Sure, I would do probably the same thing, I guess, if I had that. But it just felt like she was just...
I feel like she did some more things, but I would have to go back and rewatch, and I'm not going to. So,
okay. Who else? I don't know. That's
you know what? I didn't have
jumps around.
I didn't have a good place to say this either, but I like that we also, as a fan, I like that we saw Genosha, and going back to Magneto's. He's just It's not depicted how it's depicted any other way. It's always like this rock fortress with like high tech looking buildings. It's like this. It's always this like Cloud City-esque thing. This one is just like a hippie colony, and I really liked that. I don't know why, but I really liked that version of Genosha, because it goes back towards the idea that Magneto just wants to be left alone. Just leave him alone. Just let him farm. Just let him have his beet farm. It's fine. Let him live it
with his best friend, the
dreadlock guy. Whip guy, and he can live in a shack. That's all he wants. Just let him have that. Nope, you got to drag him out of retirement yet again and traumatize him and bring up.
And then immediately he wants to kill.
Yep.
Why did? Oh, yeah. I feel like also that kind of going back to what we started the conversation with. Like those were some of the character things that I don't like. Beast, really? Beast is going to go team up with Magneto to kill Jean Grey,
right?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, he's in love with Mystique, so he needs revenge. Apparently,
I guess. Yep. Beast and revenge. That's what I think of.
I definitely imagine him turning to Kelsey Grammer.
What else? I think that. I don't know what else there's to say.
We're past the hour mark, and I don't think we. I didn't think we were going to have enough to talk about with this movie, so I'm kind of actually amazed. Though that timeline did take a little while.
Yes, but in general, like. It wasn't awful. It's by far not my least of the X-Men films. But it was ultimately, I think, just disappointing for what is what is the finale to this version of the cinematic X-Men.
Yeah, and again, I think if they had known it was going to be the last main series X-Men, it would have been a bigger deal. And I think it's just, as just a random X-Men movie, it's fine. It's fine. It is what it is. It's okay. I don't know. I hope that Disney doesn't touch this series for a while, like a good while.
Yeah,
I would like, they always do their things in phases, and it's always like 6 movies a phase or whatever. I don't want this to happen for at least 1 or 2 phases. Like I don't want to see X-Men happen in the MCU for a while, and when they do, I want it to be enough time there where everyone's kind of forgotten the last version, and everyone's okay with casting someone else as Wolverine, because if you tried to do that now, people would riot. Just give it some time, figure out the logistics of how you would make that make sense in the MCU, and do it properly, and just let it be what it is.
Well, I mean, I think that I don't know if I read this somewhere, or maybe just talking with friends or you guys. I mean, you guys are friends too. Those are
thanks.
Exclusive, but
I also consider you a friend. Thank you.
Yay!
You have one.
Friendship's magic. Is that instead of doing like an X-Men film in the MCU, is like slowly introducing the idea of mutants in the next couple MCU films without having like the X-Men, and then doing one-offs that are maybe like an X-Men film or a film that is, Professor X or whatever. I mean, we've had so much Professor X that's not the greatest example, but you know what I mean? Instead of it being immediately X-Men, start off slowly, gradually incorporating the idea of mutants in other of the films, and kind of build to something where like, okay, now we're ready for, like you said, maybe a whole phase later.
Right.
Now we're going to do an actual X-Men.
Well, I think one of the bummers is that like they already did Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and then killed Quicksilver, and they had to pretend that they weren't mutants. They were mutants, but they were mutated in a laboratory, so they weren't really mutants. But I actually just came up with this idea, but I actually think maybe a way they could do it is, I was mentioning in the Avengers, one of the Avengers podcasts, that I want to see more movies explored in the time gap between Captain Marvel and Iron Man, or whenever Captain Marvel shows up again. I would love to see us go back to that period with younger Nick Fury, and maybe Nick Fury knows about the mutants, and maybe this is something that was going on in the background, and it's just been kept a secret by S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever. Then we can go back and explore. We could even have some other characters pop up or whatever, and we could go back and explore those time periods with a different context, knowing that mutants were around the whole time, and that.
Yeah, I mean, even that in of itself builds in some really intriguing conflict of this idea of like S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, obviously they explored this with the Winter Soldier and the repercussions from Hydra being infiltrated, but just the idea of S.H.I.E.L.D. keeping a cap on mutants,
right?
Like, this whole time they've known about them, and they've been just stifling them and not letting it become public knowledge. That would be already like an interesting dynamic that you could just kind of seep into the existing MCU.
I think it might have been a friend, or it might have been something I read online. Also, if it was a friend and they're listening, I'm sorry that I can't remember who it was. But the idea that maybe after the snap, everybody who came back is like, not everybody, but like some people are like, oh, I was resurrected and now I'm mutated somehow, or that's kind of weird, but it might work. It could make that work too.
Or it could be like Korra Book 3, just a whole bunch of
I deleted the whole series from my memory. Oh yeah, right. The world just needs airbenders, so the airbenders just and by the world I mean the plot. So airbenders just wake up one day and they're airbenders.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
They can do that too.
Let's just have mutants in the next phase of the MCU, and we'll just pretend like they were always around and
just everyone talks as if like
this has been part of our society the whole time. Never acknowledged. Whatever. You know what? They had Endgame. At this point, we have what did we say? 22 movies. They can screw this series up if they want.
Yeah, exactly. They do whatever they want with it now. They built up this credibility. Just whatever. Just take a couple movies off. Just like phone it in and don't care anymore.
Exactly. Just like this movie.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
All right. Well, that's our discussion of X-Men Dark Phoenix. What did you guys think of X-Men Dark Phoenix? How does it rank in your list of X-Men cinematic
Please
endeavors.
email us a very thoroughly written, thought out, detailed,
Yes.
organized list of your rankings of all the X-Men movies. Also put Deadpool in there because we were too much of a coward to do it.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, if you have a visualization of our perfect timeline, please feel free to create that and send it to us.
Or just go to Google image search X-Men fan timeline, download whatever the first thing you find, and send it to us and pretend that you made it.
We'll give you credit.
All right. Okay.
Speaking of giving you credit, we're still waiting for one more email.
Was it one more? I thought it was
from all
two
of our
more.
listeners. We've had four. We've received 4 emails.
All right. I'm changing the requirement to 6.
People are
Six
gonna
more.
get super upset. We're moving the goalposts, everyone. No, we're sticking with 5, but we have yet to receive 5. So
Perfect.
who knows? Maybe we'll just never get it, and it won't matter.
Yep. Maybe no one's listening and none of this matters. And by maybe, I mean definitely. All right, let's take it home. This has been, what episode is this? Episode 39. 39 of After the Credits, a YumChunks podcast. This has been Matt Shuey and Sean Davis. If you like what you hear and you want to hear us somewhere else, we are on Podience, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, a whole bunch of other ones. If you want to contact us, leave a comment on any of those that have comment sections, or email us at yumchunks@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. If you have a counterpoint to anything we've said, if you disagree with anything, say it, and we'll read it on air and tell you why we think you're right or wrong. Probably right, because we're not very smart. So there you go. That's that. What do you got? What do you got, Sean? How do we end in this?
See ya, bub.
Na-na-na-na-na.
Bamf. Hey, Mon ami. Snicked.
What was that?
That's
That was
Colossus.
Blob.
Yeah.
He was poor. He was very underrepresented in the series. I would have won way more Blob.
Make it so, number 1.
No good. All right. Bye, everyone.
This has been
After the Credits.
a YumChunks podcast.